investigation 2, part 1 from our motion and matter investigations in science. You are going to need your checklist for motion and matter investigation 1, part 2, a pencil, the cardboard, and 1, 2, 3, 4 clothespins for this investigation.
Thanks, Miss G. And to build your ramp, you will put a clothespin on each end of the ramp, okay? And then you put another clothespin like that, and it should be able to stand up like so. Now it's very important when you have your ramp made that you don't lean on it, you don't push down on it, because it could collapse or bend your ramp.
And that'll influence your results when we go to do the investigations. Please go ahead and set up your ramp and then raise your hand and have your teacher come over to check your understanding. Now that your ramp is set up and your teacher has initialed in the first box to show that your ramp is set up properly, you're going to need to get your materials box. In your materials box, you are going to have green shafts and multiple wheels of different sizes.
All right, for this first investigation, you're going to need 1 green shaft and 2 of the red wheels that are the same size. To build your first system, notice that the wheel has 3 holes in it. You're going to put the shaft in the middle hole, and you're also going to put this shaft through this wheel's middle hole. So that system is set up. You can also build one with your little wheels, because they are also both the same size. Once you have both systems made, go ahead and start with the first one, which had the red wheels, and I want to show you how you're going to roll it down the ramp. Okay, for this experiment, we are going to set the system at the top of the ramp and then simply just let it go and observe how it rolls down. What we don't want to do is we don't want to shove or push our system down the ramp. We just want to set it at the top and let go of it and let gravity do its thing.
Watch the force of gravity interact with your system.
And observe how it rolls down the ramp.
So, when you have this set up, go ahead and do your own investigation. Sorry, pause the video first, and then set it up, following the directions Mr. Montgomery gave you. Observe what happens, and then raise your hand so your teacher can come over and see what you have done.
All right, for this next investigation, you will need 1 green shaft, 1 small wheel, and 1 large wheel. And we're going to observe the pattern of motion, or how it rolls down the ramp, when we use 1 small wheel and 1 big wheel. Again, we're going to put the shaft through the middle hole on the big wheel.
Now, on your paper, it says on opposite ends, so that means that they are on, opposite is each end. They aren't on the same end, they're on different ends. So when it says 1 small wheel, 1 large wheel on opposite ends, that's what it means.
And for this investigation, I'd like you to do the same thing where you just simply set it at the top, let go of it, and observe its pattern of motion. How does it roll down the ramp? But I want you to try to do it both ways. So if you look here, I have the red wheel on this side. So I'll roll it down once with the red wheel on this side, and then I'll actually flip it and put the red wheel on the other side and roll it down again to see the pattern of motion, if anything changes if I roll it down a different way.
And as Mr. Montgomery's partner, we're going to be having conversations about what we observe, trying to use our best science vocabulary to describe the patterns of motion that we see happening. So when you're ready, pause the video, set up the system observe, and then raise your hand so your teacher can come over and check your understanding.
For this next investigation, you're going to need 2 of the red wheels and a green shaft. And for this one, you are going to explore what happens if you put the green shaft in different wheel holes. So for example, for this first one, I might put it in the top wheel hole. And then for this wheel, I might put it in the
middle.
Let's do the middle. So I have 1 in the top and 1 in the middle. Top, middle. And it's the same thing. We'll set it on the top. We're not pushing it down. We're not shoving it down. We're just letting go. And we're going to observe the pattern of motion and talk to each other about how it rolled down the ramp.
Now, Mr. Montgomery, when you said wheel hole, do you mean those things on the outside or just the holes in the middle of the wheel?
Definitely the holes in the middle of the wheel.
Okay. So make sure that you're only using the holes in the middle of the wheel. Pause the video, set up your system, observe the pattern of motion, and then raise a quiet hand and have your teacher come over.
You are going to need 2 green shafts and your 2 large wheels. And for this investigation, you're going to observe the pattern of motion when you use 2 green shafts.
So, Mr. Montgomery, real quick, on my checklist, I noticed that it's not talking about green shafts, it's talking about axles. When you say green shafts, do you mean axle?
I absolutely mean axle, thank you.
Just making sure that we know that the green shaft and the axle are the same thing.
Yes. So I'm going to use my green axle, and I'm going to use 2 of them. And I'm going to put them into my red wheel here.
That's good.
And once I have it set up, I'm going to set it at the top and...
Mr. Montgomery, I'm just going to remind you the only thing you need to do right now is let it go, let it go. Don't push it. Pause the video, set up your system, observe the pattern of motion, and raise a quiet hand. We have done number 5, so this is the end of the front. You are going to need to flip your checklist onto the back because there are still some systems that we need to create. So we are on number 6, axles in the outside indentations of the wheels.
If you look very closely at your wheels, you'll notice that they have these little grooves on the outside. We haven't really used them until now, but for this experiment, you're going to have some freedom of which wheels you want to use. I'm just going to demonstrate with the red wheel. So you'll need your green axle and a wheel, okay? And you set the green axle into the groove. You're going to push down.
Use those muscles, Mr. Montgomery.
Push down, but as you push down, you're also pushing this up to try and get it to snap in.
Glad you ate your Wheaties.
So once you get it in one side, you'll do the same thing in the other side. Try to get it to snap in. If you struggle with this, okay, just stick with it. You'll be able to get it in there.
Looks like your thumb had a lot of power there. Thumbs might be a really helpful thing to use.
Yep. And then you'll set it at the top of the ramp, and you'll
let it go.
Let it go. Don't push it.
This is investigation 7, 3 wheels.
So for this investigation, you're only going to need 1 green axle, and you can have some freedom with how you want to set this up, but you are going to be needing to use 3 of your wheels. And there's different ways you can use the 3 wheels. For example, you might use a yellow wheel on the outside and a red wheel in the middle and another yellow wheel on the outside. Notice there's 3 wheels. But there's also other things you could do. You could use a red, and a yellow. Notice how that's a little bit different. So it probably has a different pattern of motion. And so for this experiment, we want you to do 2 different ways to use 3 wheels and roll both of those ways down your ramp.
And so you're going to have to explain, when you raise your quiet hand, you're going to have to explain to your teacher your different systems you created and the pattern of motion. So you need to do 2 and be able to explain them.
2 different ones, yep.
Yeah.
And remember, when you do them, you set it at the top and you let it go, let it go, don't push it.
Go ahead, pause the video, set up your 2 systems of motion, raise a quiet hand when you're finished, and be ready to explain the systems you created and the patterns of motion. Now that we have completed number 7, 3 wheels, on our checklist, and our teacher has initialed in the box, we're going to have a conversation.
So your focus question was to observe the patterns of motion of different wheel and axle systems. So at this point, take a few minutes and talk to your partner about some of the different systems you made with the axles and the wheels, and the patterns of motion that you observed with those different systems.
So the patterns of motion is really what happened. How did it move?
How did it roll down the ramp? What did we see happening?
Yeah, and so our conversation should have really great science vocabulary like wheels and axles and shafts and systems and patterns of motion. So those are words that we need to have in our conversation.
Definitely. It's so exciting how much there's to learn when you get to be hands-on and do all this exploring, but we definitely want to make sure we're learning while we're exploring these materials.
Absolutely.